Good evening, everybody. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Somerville Planning Board. It is 6:01 p.m. on August 4th, 2022. I'm Mike Capuano. I am the chairman of the Planning Board. With me tonight is Amelia Aboff, Erin Gino, and Jahan Habib. And pursuant to Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting of the Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation. A recording of these proceedings can be accessed at any time using the registration link at the top of the agenda. This meeting is being recorded. So we have a number of items, many items on our agenda tonight. We have, for the purpose of reading the agenda, 16 and 20 Medford Street, which has been continued from June 16th. That will be heard this evening. 50 Webster Avenue has 4 items currently on the agenda, 3 of which have been requested to be continued. So we have 50 Webster Avenue, which is Planning and Zoning 21-060. That is the site plan approval for a building that has been requested to be continued. So the chair moves to continue that agenda item to the 18th. Seconded by Erin. Chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Erin votes aye.
That is continued to the 18th. The next is 50 Webster Avenue, Planning and Zoning 22-073, which is a site plan approval for a thoroughfare. That has been requested for a continuance to the 18th. The chair moves to continue that agenda item to August 18. The chair votes aye. Seconded by Erin. Chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Erin votes aye.
That item is continued. The next on the agenda is 50 Webster Avenue, Planning and Zoning 21-166, which is a site plan approval request for a Central Plaza civic space. That has been requested to be continued to August 18th. The chair moves to continue that agenda item, seconded by Erin. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Erin votes aye.
And the last item on the agenda is 50 Webster Avenue, seeking a subdivision plan approval. That will be heard tonight. Does that need to be read into the record? Or has that been previously opened?
I believe the site subdivision plan approval needs to be read into the record.
If I could please ask the clerk of the planning board to read into the record the notice of public hearing for that agenda item.
Sure. So this is 50 Webster Avenue, PNZ 22-067, US Union Square D3, One Owner LLC, seeks a subdivision in the HR zoning district, which requires subdivision plan approval.
Thank you, and we will take that agenda item up in a little bit. We also have 231 to 249 Elm Street and 6 through 8 and number 12 Grove Street, which is the same application, which is planning and zoning number 21-068. Excuse me, I will ask the clerk of the planning board to read that into the record.
Great. So again, this is for 231 through 249 Elm Street and 6 through 8 and 12 Grove Street, PNZ 21-068. Scape Davis Square LLC proposes to develop a LEED Platinum 4-story lab building in the commercial core district, which requires site plan approval.
Thank you very much. Those are the public hearings that we had on the agenda. We have a serious number of items for other business, including several recommendations on agenda items for amendments to zoning ordinance that have previously been heard, have previously been opened, testimony has been taken, testimony has closed, and that is a proposal on the backyard cottage accessory building. There is an amendment to the zoning ordinance map for 82 to 84 Prospect Street. There is a request for an amendment to the zoning ordinance for 129R Highland Avenue. There is a request for an amendment to the zoning ordinance for replacing certain language. And there is a request for an amendment to the zoning ordinance to change the zoning district of an address on White Street Place. We will also have a presentation on submission requirements as presented by staff, and also a proposed amendment that the planning board intends to submit to the city council on representation when a counselor is absent or recused from their ability to act in their function as ward counselor for planning board applications as it relates to neighborhood meetings. So it is the chair's discretion to take items on the agenda out of order. So I'm going to start with the zoning amendments because we've taken a lot of testimony on them already. We have had written testimony that has since closed, and it is now our time to vote to make recommendations to the council on these various agenda items. I think Dan Botman is available on staff for a, I don't know if he's going to make a presentation because he's already made a presentation, but on discussion by members of the board in preparation for a vote on the agenda item. So I'd welcome Dan to join us, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I am here. Thank you for having me. Happy to answer any questions about any of these items.
Sure. Like I said, we've taken quite a bit of testimony on these, including presentations and discussion by you, Dan, in previous meetings. It's just been a couple of weeks since we touched these, but I will go through them one on one. The first is City Councilor at Large Wilson proposing an amendment to the zoning ordinances, section 31.1.6.d, residence district to permit the backyard cottage accessory building type by right. This is something that we discussed at the last we met, and I don't know if any members of the planning board have any questions or discussion on this particular agenda item. Okay. The only thing I will say is, based on our discussion, I think it makes sense. Staff, I believe, had made a suggestion that we should recommend adoption of this item. So I will move that the planning board adopt a recommendation to support this particular zoning amendment, seconded by Aaron. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Okay. The item has been voted to be recommended for adoption to the city council. The next one is Vivaldo Manessa Sr. requesting the adoption of amendment to the zoning ordinance map to change the zoning district 82 to 84 Prospect Street from MR5 to UR. And as I recall our discussion on this and the presentation by the applicant and the discussion by staff, this is to make two kind of adjoining parcels uniform in how they are zoned, and it fits within the context of the neighborhood in which it sits. And I heard positive comments from the public and from staff on this particular zoning amendment suggestion. So I would offer any questions or comments by my fellow members to be raised now for this particular item? Seeing none, I move to recommend that the planning board recommend adoption of this particular agenda item to the city council, seconded by Aaron. Chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
That item has been recommended for approval. The next is 3 owners requesting the adoption of amendment to the zoning ordinance map to change the zoning district of 129R Highland Avenue from UR to NR. One of those weird little parcels that's behind another parcel, and we're trying to make things in that neighborhood, in that area, more uniform. I heard no testimony really in opposition to this amendment. Similarly, I heard no opposition to this amendment by staff. I don't know if the planning board has any comments or questions of staff or the proponent of this at this time. Yes, Aaron.
Thanks. I do have a quick question just to refresh my memory. I believe, if I remember correctly, looking at this parcel from Highland Ave, so like if you're going east on Highland, that would be to your left. Sort of kitty corner to this parcel is, I believe, a large church building that is like potentially redeveloped or potential has like adjacency to this parcel. So I was wondering if maybe someone from staff could refresh my memory on if this change will affect the setbacks on that kitty quarter adjacent parcel and would sort of create any non-compliance issues for the existing building that's there.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is the same concern that we heard, which was the only issue raised, was how would designating this UR lot NR impact the setback, increased setback that is required of apartment buildings when they abut an NR property. And then the building separation distance is also a metric to pay attention to when related to abutting lots. From what we can tell based off of looking at the satellite photos and whatnot, because we don't have a measured site plan of either parcel at the moment, is estimates that it wouldn't impact reuse of the existing structure to be converted into an apartment building in its current form. The degree to which the side of the building is already within its own setback or violating any building separation distance measurement that may be triggered by this is something, an inherent trait to that property that they get to keep and even expand in certain dimensions. For instance, further back on the property, because it's in a, from what I can tell, it's potentially violating the side setback, but that's a projection to the side, not a projection in depth also. So that are the interpretation of how the violation of different side setbacks is that you could go further back, but not violate the side setback any further. You just can't make the problem worse. So a portion of the building could even be have an addition and potentially utilize some of the non-conforming characteristics to even expand the building. I just can't give you exact dimensions because I don't have any measurements of those properties in exact format. The other thing I wanted to add is that there's lots of room on the other side of the building. It's kind of an L shape for further expansion of the building to like achieve the apartment building dimensions that are permitted, even if they decided to redevelop the site and include the existing building in that project, like save the building but expand on it. So there may be technically an imposed additional side setback that they're already not compliant with, and that would be a characteristic that they're allowed to just not make worse, but can live with and actually utilize as a non-conforming characteristic of the property. So from what we can tell, this would not negatively impact any redevelopment of 125 Lowell if the property were mapped into the NR zoning district. It would trigger those additional setbacks from a technical standpoint, though. So they're kind of both true.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Byron. That helps a lot. So as I understand it, it would be what we, by approving this, we would say, or recommending this for the council, we would say, okay, the NR parcels that are adjacent are more uniform, and that sort of makes the neighborhood a little bit less patchworky. And then for the adjacent parcel, it wouldn't sort of dimensionally restrict redevelopment into an apartment building based on the fact that they have an existing condition and that there is conforming space either in the back or on the side to allow them to achieve the floor plates that they would need to.
Yes, all of that is correct.
Okay, great. That I think alleviates my concerns with this proposed change.
Thank you. Erin, does anybody have any other comments or questions that they would like to make of staff or of the proponent?
Thank you to Erin and to Dan for walking us through that in more detail. That was very helpful.
I appreciate that. Seeing no further comment or question, the chair moves to recommend the planning board adopt or make a recommendation that the council adopt this particular map amendment. Seconded by Erin. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Erin votes aye.
That item has been recommended for approval by the council. The next agenda item is Mayor Ballantyne requesting a text amendment to the Somerville zoning ordinance to repeal all references to a certificate of zoning compliance and replace with a requirement for the building official to conduct a zoning compliance review and maintain a public record of such reviews for all development. Yes, striking all references. It's my understanding, based on our last meeting, that this is intended to facilitate applicants to actually move forward with projects that have been approved, and it's more or less an efficiency amendment. So I have every intent to support efficiency where we can. I don't know if anybody on the board has any questions or comments for the staff as representatives of the administration seeking this amendment. Okay, seeing none, I move to recommend adoption of this particular ordinance amendment to the council, striking absolutely all references to the certificate of zoning compliance. Seconded by Erin. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Erin votes aye.
That item has been recommended for approval. The last item on this section of other business is Thomas J. Cook requesting the adoption of an amendment to the zoning ordinance map to change the zoning district of 14 White Street Place from NR to MR4. I recall the testimony that was made on this agenda item, as well as discussion that was on it. It was generally supportive. I don't know if members of the board have comments or questions that they would like to raise to the proponent of this amendment or of staff at this time. Seeing none, the chair will move to recommend adoption to the city council of this particular agenda item, seconded by Erin. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Erin votes aye.
That agenda item has been recommended unanimously for approval by the city council. Next item on the agenda, which is not really on the agenda, is an item called 10 Washington Street, which was somehow placed on the planning board's agenda in error. It's supposed to be on the zoning board of appeals agenda. The planning board does not have this case before it. So if anybody is in the audience looking to make testimony on this agenda item, or if for whatever reason the applicant is in front of the planning board, we are not taking this up this evening. This is not our agenda item. It is not an agenda item which we can continue or do anything with because it is not properly before the board. So if anybody is here on that agenda item, we will not be taking that up this evening. You are not required to leave in case there are other agenda items that you want to talk about, but we'll not be talking about that one. I have a note that we actually need to open the other Webster Avenue cases. Could I ask Risa if that's accurate or if the continuance has been appropriate?
This is Risa speaking. The 50 Webster, the building, the civic space and the thoroughfare could be opened this hearing, but it could also be opened the next hearing when they're present.
Okay, because they've already been continued. I'm just wondering if we need to make a procedural correction to formally open them and then continue them. It sounds like the answer is no, so I will not do that. Next item on the agenda that I intend to take up is 16 and 20 Medford Street, which has previously been opened. Testimony has been taken, a presentation has been made, and now additional information by the applicant has been presented. So I would invite the applicant and the applicant's team to be unmuted, to have them share their screen if so desired. And then after the presentation, any questions by the planning board, I will open it up to public testimony.
This is Risa speaking. I do have a few names that I'm going to unmute. If you can please let me know who will be the presenter tonight so I can make you the presenter for the night. I am unmuting Tanya Carrier. Tanya, you have been unmuted. If you can please let us know who will be the presenter tonight.
Yes, thank you. I will be sharing the screen.
All right. Tanya, you should be able to share your screen right now. And I'm going to unmute the other two members. Ugo D. Bias, you have been unmuted. You are self-muted on your end. And Nicholas, I have also unmuted you as well. I see your hand raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Risa. We appreciate that. Mr. Chair, Attorney Nick Zazula, McDermott, Quilty, and Miller, 28 State Street in Boston. As Ms. Risa just read into the, or just unmuted us, Hugo DiBiase from Somerville Living LLC and DiBiase Homes. Tanya Carrera from Calsa Design Inc. is our architect. Risa, we also have Erin Hosseini Fitch from Verdant, who's our landscape architect, and David Giangrande from GM2, who's our traffic and civil engineer. If you could unmute them at some point as well. Mr. Chair, members of the board, as you mentioned, this is our second time, so we're going to jump right into the presentation. I know you've got a long agenda. I'm not going to go over a lot of the details that we went over last time. What we've tried to do tonight is to answer the questions that we got back on June 16th and to curate our presentation to those questions to answer them directly. This is a much shorter presentation. Obviously, if there's other items that you'd like us to cover, we do have those in an appendix and we're happy to go into them. But we have kept this very short and brief, I think 10 or 11 slides only, to directly hit what you asked the last time and to appropriately answer them. So with that, I'll throw it over to Tanya, who will do her best to go through everything as quickly as possible. Tanya, take it away.
Great, thank you everyone, and we appreciate coming back here tonight. So let me go through. So just a brief recap of the team. DiBiase Homes is the owner developer. McDermott, Quilty, and Miller as the legal counsel. We have Robert Bird as EnviroTrack, from EnviroTrack as the LSP. And we have our sustainability consultant, Mark Price. Calso Design as the architect, GM2 as the traffic and civil engineer, and Verdant as the landscape architect. So just a brief recap of the site. We're at 1620 Medford Street, where the existing Cubby Oil and Somerville gas station is located. And we do front on 4 streets. So a little bit of a unique setup there. And a recap of our timeline. We've started this process back in June of last year, and we've been meeting with different neighborhood groups and the city ever since. And our project summary, so we are doing a mixed-use 4-story general building in the MR4 zone with 3,500 square feet of commercial space fronting directly onto Medford and Warren Streets. We have 41 residential units of condominiums proposed and 20% affordable units. And we have a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. We do have a few building amenities such as remote work room, flex room, fitness room, package room, private balconies, and a common roof deck and green roof. And we have 43 off-street garage parking spaces, including 11 EV spaces, and the remainder to be EV ready. And we do have 2 visitor drop-off short-term spaces, which I'll show you, and a fully enclosed bike room with 42 long-term spaces and then 10 visitor spaces around the site. And we are doing a LEED Platinum certifiable building. So one of the questions we received from you was to clarify the trash location. And here I've kind of pointed out, and I'll show you on the larger plan as well, where our trash room is. So we have planned for a fully enclosed trash room for trash and recycling. It would be accessed from the grade level parking area. Residents could easily access it from there. And the trash would be brought out directly onto Bedford Street with direct access from the trash room to Bedford Street. And the building will be professionally managed. So the plan is that the building manager would bring it out, and it would just be in the form of totters versus large dumpsters. And then for the commercial trash room, similar setup, but fronting on Warren Street with a door directly to Warren Street and a door directly to the commercial space. So another important question you guys posed was how we're going to accommodate deliveries for the building. And in looking at your question, we did make a few minor revisions to really help facilitate an easier delivery. So we do have here highlighted the 2 short-term parking spaces where delivery parkers could park directly off of Bedford Street. And we did move the garage door back to the ramp location so that this area is all open. It's covered, but it's open where you wouldn't need private access into the garage. And that allows you to have a door straight into the lobby. And then we have a 180 square foot package room right off that lobby, and also on our mail area. We plan to use a system such as like the butterfly system, which allows the door to be accessed for the deliveries. We also have extra room available just outside the door for a potential parcel locker area if needed, if the butterfly system wasn't sufficient on that. So that's kind of our plan for deliveries. And we think it's a pretty good setup having the direct access straight in from the short-term parking spaces. So the next slide, I will turn it to Dave Giagrande from GM2.
Good evening, everyone. Dave Giagrande here from GM2. I was requested to look at a couple of things. First and foremost, there was some concern that at some point in time, South Street, the one-way peering might actually change. And there were some questions regarding looking at that both ways, which we actually, I didn't realize at our last meeting, but we had looked at them in both directions. So what you have here before you is that the trip distribution from if in the event South Street is changed one way towards Medford Street, and what that pattern is. Just in general, I just want to reiterate that because of the intensity of the use, the existing use is a gas station site and headquarters for Cubby Oil, delivery and service. We're generating about 50% less trips. So I think we've got to keep that in mind. And so for instance, on Bedford Street, in the AM peak, we would have only approximately 2 vehicles coming in, and from the neighborhood, 4 vehicles coming in the PM peak, and 5 vehicles on a Saturday peak. So it's minor in nature. The other question that came up, which is a very important question, is why have the access off of Bedford Street? And it was something that was discussed up front with the mobility staff. And I think you've got to look at the hierarchy of the streets and how the mobility staff wants to manage, and how we want to manage conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles. So we feel that they're creating these wider streets in particular along, and there's pedestrian desire routes along Medford Street, as well as South Street. So they want to consolidate the curb cuts. We're bringing everything to a curb cut on Bedford Street. We also did do turning movements on Bedford Street for that garage. And if anybody doesn't know what turning movements are, is we emulate different types of vehicles, how they can access the site. Are the curb cuts wide enough? Placement of the door, etc. So yes, the access is adequate off of Bedford Street. There is a small number of cars versus what the use was in the past. And yes, we did look at changing the direction of South Street. So I'll be here if you have any questions, but I wanted to make sure you understood that we did go in and look at any of the questions regarding the traffic.
Great, thank you, Dave. So I'll just go through the remainder and then we can go on to questions. So just to show you an overall view of our proposed site plan with those items we mentioned, the trash room here fronting on Bedford Street, also our vehicular entry on Bedford Street, our short-term parking spaces and access to the building lobby, and then our commercial trash room on Warren Street. And just also a reminder of our public improvements with the 12-foot sidewalks that we are increasing on all 4 sides substantially, and adding street trees, etc., and closing the existing long curb cuts. And just showing our exterior design. Nothing has changed on this since the last meeting. We focused on the comments we received. So we've broken up the upper floors in a residential style with projecting bays and recessed balconies to give some dynamic to the facade there. And then on the ground level, we've broken up into 2 different facade schemes, one on Medford for the commercial space and one on South and wrapping Medford for the residential space, and using masonry materials on that level, along with our street trees all around the building, and then having a central kind of focal point, which was something that was discussed at the UDC. And we did include an aerial view just to show our building massing and how it would fit into the neighborhood, and also to show the new sidewalks that would be proposed around the building. So here's our massing view looking from Medford Street, and you can see our green roof deck as well. and then just how the building kind of complements the scale of the building across the street. And that's the completion of our presentation for this evening.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I think it's informative, and I think it does respond to some of the questions and issues that were raised by the board and public the last time around. I will note that the supplemental staff memorandum that the board has received has indicated that the staff has not had the appropriate time to be able to run it by the city departments that are required for them to be able to make a recommendation to the planning board. So that on its face makes me want to, we're going to take some testimony, but I am hesitant to make a vote on this application this evening until the staff and the responsible city departments have had an opportunity to review it and make their recommendations as they see fit. But I've seen a note from Andrew saying that staff has had an opportunity to review. So what I'd like to do is ask Andrew or any responsible person on the staff to be able to make a presentation on the review and recommendations on what's been presented. And then I'm going to open it up to public testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Andrew Graminsky here, Planner, Planning, Preservation, and Zoning. I want to apologize that we never did get you a staff memo in time. We weren't sure what our timeline was, but we were able to fit this review in, so we do apologize that we did not get you a formal memo, but we do want to report that staff do not see any negative impacts created by these changes. The new transformer vault is in compliance. It's not encroaching into any required front setbacks. It's located to the correct side setbacks. The location of the garage door was reviewed by Mobility, and they also do not have any concerns regarding those changes. And that is all I have to report tonight. Thank you so much.
I actually very, very much appreciate, Andrew, you jumping in and letting us know that there's been an amendment to what we saw even as of a couple of days ago. That's very helpful for the way that I kind of knew what might happen with this application. So what I'd like to do, because we did have some additional information that was presented by the applicant and a comment from the staff, I'm going to open it up to members of the planning board who have any comments or questions of staff or of the applicant at this time. And following that, I'm going to open it up to public testimony. Does anybody on the board have any comments or questions on this application at this time? Yes, Amelia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the applicant, could you confirm what view exactly we are looking at in the plan provided in the packet that's labeled Bedford view? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to sort of reconcile what I think I would expect to see with what is in the packet, and I'm trying to understand sort of fully what the appearance from the backside of the building looks like, and since there isn't another, it's a little bit tricky with the corner layout.
Sure. Let me go to that slide. Is this a 3D view you're referencing?
Either a 3D view or the elevations, yeah. So the Bedford Street elevation, that's showing only the shorter end of the building. Is that what we're seeing there?
Correct. What you see on the left half of this view is the shorter end of the building facing Bedford, and the rest is kind of at an angle going back. That's really the rear view behind.
We don't have none of these elevations shows sort of the full backside of the building.
I do have that. I can show you.
Thank you.
Right here. So these are the rear elevations. There are two angles. So the top one would be the left. Bedford Street is on the left here. And then this is your rear elevation. And this portion's at an angle. And we give you a flat view as well for that portion below it.
Thank you. That is very helpful. I'll have a follow-up question here, but I'm happy to go to comments.
Yep.
Thank you.
Nope, I was actually going to ask you if you had any additional comments or questions, and I realized I was muted. You'd think that after 2.5 years, we'd be better at this. Yeah. Yeah, Amelia, do you want to ask your follow-up question?
I was trying to recall whether the requirement for a facade longer than 100 feet to sort of be visually distinct as two buildings also applied to something like the rear elevation. As in my review, I was a little bit unsure whether the patterning sort of the front facade on Medford was echoed in the rear facade. So I guess it's something I would appreciate staff clarification on as it applies here.
This is Andrew Gravinsky. I can respond to board member Aboff's comment. So the requirement you're speaking of is for the front facade of the building. For a building that's greater than 100 feet, needs to be broken up into the sort of the two facade looks. The rear does not.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Actually, Amelia, do you have any other questions, or is that your follow-up?
That was my only follow-up on this item. I have other questions relating to loading and deliveries, but I'll save them to the end. Thank you.
Okay. I am actually going to follow up on Amelia's question and Andrew's answer to that. What is looking at the back of this building? I think we have seen some of the renderings as to what's around, but what exactly is looking at the back of this building? Because even though the design guidelines don't necessarily govern that, it is something that the board takes into consideration when we are looking at the design of a building to make sure that somebody's not looking at, the back of a building that looks like nothing.
Yes, so here's the aerial view showing the existing structures that are behind the building. So we do have one off of Warren, which is fairly close, but we are moving our building further away than the existing building was.
Yeah, and that looks like a two-family home.
I'm not sure how many occupants are in it, but it's a standard, flat roof, two or three family probably.
Okay. All right. Ideally, I would like to see, because there is somebody who's going to be looking at the back of your building, ideally, I would like to see some more distinction between some of the sections of the back of that building, like you have done for the front. I understand that the zoning ordinance doesn't require it, but as planning board does have the authority to request that you make some modifications so that somebody's not just looking at one long, facade that looks like a giant building. Can we see the back of the building again, please?
Yes, so the building in the back is kind of angled. So the first half of this, actually on the bottom here, the first half is what that building would be looking at. So we've carried the same treatment around and broken it up with bays and recessed balconies with cedar siding inserts.
Do you have anything that makes that a little bit clearer as to, because obviously this looks like I'm looking from 2 blocks away. Is there something that zooms in on what exactly they would be looking at so that we can all see the materiality and depth of the windows and things like that?
Yeah, let me try to pull it up for you.
Can you just zoom in on the slide, Tanya?
Yeah, if you can do that, that might.
If you could tell me how, I'm not that tech savvy. Is it Control Z?
Low, right at the bottom of your screen when you just had when you were there, there you go, zoom in and then perfect. Sorry, Chair, I just wanted to jump in there.
No, I appreciate that. So the back of the
Maybe
building.
a little more, yeah.
So this is the rear elevation with some balconies and some delineation between materials, and I think that serves some purpose to be able to make sure that somebody's not just looking at the flat facade to the back of the building. But if I was somebody who had to look at this building all day, that's half a block from my house, or the next lot over, I'm not sure this necessarily, I'm looking specifically kind of what I'm looking at is the right side of this building where there's, looks like, yes, exactly. It just looks like a bunch of flat windows without anything that makes the facade, interesting or broken up. And, it's not something that I'm going to hang up the entire project on if my fellow board members don't agree with my concern. But I feel like it doesn't do a lot for folks that are going to have to, look at this building from their homes. I'm wondering if there's a way that you might be able to make at least some of the building broken up a little bit, and definitely do something with the right side of that to make it a little bit more engaging.
Okay, yeah, we can certainly break up this kind of piece into a couple different materials. I also want to point out we do have some, the trees are shown a little small here, but we've done some buffering trees along that property as well as a fence. And then the first floor is brick as well at this corner piece where the building will be looking.
To jump on Tanya's comment, this is Erin Hosseini Fitch from Verdant. The trees proposed along the back there, they will reach about 40 feet height at maturity. So those will engage with the back as well.
I appreciate that. So it'll give some shielding. I just, it's a big building, right? And it's a big back of a building. And what you've got are a bunch of windows with some balconies, and then a kind of a flat section of the building that doesn't look like all that much. I just want to make sure that the folks that live next to that are being respected by what they will have to look at. And I don't know if my board members, my colleagues on board, share my view. If they don't, they don't. That's okay. We can move forward without that. But when we see a project of this kind of scale, we want to make sure that it's as respectful for the folks that have to look at the backside of it as we can, because we've seen a lot of developments that say, hey, I'm back of a building and nobody cares because the primary entrance is the front and that's what I want to make attractive. I don't think that's what you've done, but I just want to make sure that we're at a place where we can make it as nice as we can. And I know that the neighbors have not provided, I don't think, testimony on that particular aspect of it, but that doesn't mean that we as a board shouldn't consider it.
Mr. Chair, if I may, this is Hugo DiBiase. I'm part of the ownership group.
Sure.
I would like to state that. So I've met with some of the homeowners that are abutting on the backside, met them in person on site, and we reviewed some of this topic. And one of the things that is of concern to some of those neighbors, not specifically the one at 51 Warren Street, but I think it's 7 Bedford Street. So it's a condo association. I believe there's maybe 3 or 4 units. And right now, the existing structures that are on our property are right up against the property line. And then they have several landscape elements, trees, shrubs, things of that nature. And what we've agreed to and what I told them is that we're going to work with them to maintain those bushes and shrubs and trees that are important to them, and also let them know that we're actually going to be stepping away from this property line that's kind of shared by both properties, and further enhancing that to the best that we can with landscaping and other architectural features. And so we think that there will be a nice harmonious approach. The 7 Bedford Street, if that's the correct address, but the direct abutter on the left side of this screen, they have a double wide driveway in between the back of the existing Cubby building, which is CMU block covered with green ivy right now going all the way up. And then it's their double wide driveway. So I think by us pulling 3 to 5 feet off the property line, I think it's going to really produce a nice buffer for both our property and also their property, respectively.
Okay. I appreciate that comment, Mr. DiBiase. I see Amelia raising her hand. I think I do. You're still in a small square. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I do appreciate that from the applicant, and I just want to sort of concur with Mike here. I think that my concern with this is that while the front of the building does meet the requirement to sort of have that appearance of two different structures to break up the length of the facade, the fact that it stops as it turns the corner feels like sort of a shell or an applique on top of the facade of a big building, as opposed to it actually feeling like an architectural concept that has some integrity to it and is reflected on both sides. Like it feels disjointed to have that stop so abruptly. And so I would encourage the applicant to sort of take another look at treatment of that corner and where the light colored portion of the building sort of effectively comes to an end, just to see if there might be a minor modification that would make that feel like a more organic part of the composition. Because as the applicant's just sort of drawn out for us, this is a side of the building that will be in view from the neighbors, not only from the immediate abutters, but given the sort of short block here and the double width of the driveway and the additional setback, I think this will be quite visible from all along Bedford Street and the stretch of Porter Street that is there. I think that it would take quite a lot of development within the rest of the block to make this not visible from those sidewalks.
So Amelia, from what I'm hearing you say, do you share my concern that we might want to take another look at how the back of this building could be visualized?
If that's something the applicant would entertain, I think it has the opportunity to greatly improve the project.
It's certainly something that we can request the applicant to make before we consider a vote of the project. And I do respect the applicant's discussion with the abutters, but at the same time, this is something that the board also has the authority to be able to review and request. So I'd like to ask Aaron or Jahan if they've got any thoughts on the concerns that Amelia and I have raised on the building, or if you've got other concerns. I know Amelia said she had some follow-up questions on other matters, but I see Jahan's hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly share your and Vice Chair's concerns regarding the facade, and I would certainly encourage the opportunity for the applicant to come back and come up with perhaps a different rendering that could be considered more attractive to not just the abutters that we discussed, but the general neighborhood as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jahan. And Aaron.
I'll be maybe the one board member that's a little less concerned about this. I think having that back side of the building broken up would improve the project. I absolutely agree with my fellow board members in that matter. However, because of the sort of height of the trees there, that's what, at maturity, that's what alleviates some of my concern. Being in a residential area, I know I'm always happier looking at a tree than a differently colored building. So I would, as one board member, I would, entertain sort of both avenues of maybe extending that lightly colored part of the building so it is more of an architectural sort of aspect of the building, as opposed to that sort of front facade, as Vice Chair Aboff mentioned, or potentially adding a few more of these columnar evergreens on the back side of the building to, again, shield some of that massing, provide the neighbors maybe a more visually interesting and pleasing sort of view, and then which has the side benefit of increasing our green coverage in the city, which is a environmental factor. So that's sort of my comments there. I'm not strongly one way or another, but if I had to take a stand, it would be add a few more evergreens to the back there if you can.
Thanks, Aaron. So I think we now kind of have a somewhat uniform view of the board that we might want to have the applicant reimagine the back side of the building on top of adding some additional trees. So I think what I'm going to do is defer taking a vote on this project this evening, ask the applicant to come back to us with some suggested revisions to how to make the back of the building a little bit more engaging. People that are going to be looking at it and who live behind it, on top of additional trees.
Mr. Chair, is that, I don't want to overstep our boundaries here, but is that something that we would be able to do through a condition on the approval and staff review, or would you like us to come back to you specifically, which we'd be happy to do, of course, but I have to ask.
Come back to us. Yeah, usually when we send it to staff for review, it's, making sure that the quality, isn't shoddy and things like that. But this is, I think, a little bit more than that, and I respect your question. Thank you.
I'd be remiss if I didn't at least ask. So, but thank you for your answer. That's what I thought the answer was, but I had to ask. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that.
If I could briefly show the tree area, because we're kind of limited on area back there where we could add trees. We do have an emergency egress from the basement coming out that has to be kept clear. And we do have our transformer, which requires certain clearances. So we've put in what I think is the maximum. I'll defer to the landscape architects, but I just wanted to show the visual of that area.
I don't want to, sorry, Mr. Chair, through you.
Mm-hmm.
I know we recently had a project where there were some similar concerns about sort of integrating more of a green aspect into the building, and they resulted, I think, with a trellis that would be planted in the face of a similar constraint. I don't know whether that's something that could be entertained here, but if that were, it strikes me that that might be one avenue to address all of the concerns that I think have been voiced by my colleagues. Again, I don't know if that's appropriate here, but.
I was going to say I would encourage the applicant to, to investigate Amelia's suggestion, and if it seems like it is something that could be presented to us as an alternative, that's fine. If not, I've heard your presentation that you think you have what you can get in here based on the constraints of the layout of the building. So, so I understand that as well.
We can certainly look at that, Mr. Chair, through you to Commissioner or members. Avoff's comment certainly would be certainly an inexpensive option, I would think. But we can look at that with the landscape architect as to, viability, feasibility in terms of sun, and making sure that it actually would, some sort of ivy or something that could be inserted here. But we can certainly look at that, and maybe that's a great alternative that wouldn't necessarily cost a lot of money. But I think we'd have to look at the sun, and our, Verdant, our landscape architect, would have to look at the, how vibrant it actually would be at this side of the building, and if it would actually, stay alive. But we can look at that. It's a great idea. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Amelia, did you have, I do want to open this up to members of the public, because this is, new information that will require testimony, but did you have another question or two that you wanted to raise, or do you want to wait until the applicant comes back to us in a couple of weeks?
I'm happy to raise my other question now, and it is brief. I greatly appreciate the revisions to the sort of voting scheme that were in response to our conversation at our last meeting. I think they're a really thoughtful and creative solution. The one question I have is whether you would consider restricting the access system so that delivery drivers sort of were required to use that interior passage and possibly unable to use the exterior passage for the exterior lobby for package delivery, because it looks like there are now two separate doors, and I don't know much about I think you said butterfly access system, but my concern remains that double parking in the bike lane on Medford Street will be very tempting instead of making sort of two turns down side streets into a loading area. And I think we're 90% of the way to a very good solution on that, but wanted to just raise that for consideration operationally.
If I may, Mr. Chair, Hugo DiBiase, part of the ownership group. if there's a way through technology, we can definitely plan for that. Like myself, I've used the butterfly system or something similar. I'm not sure the limitations on that, but that does sound like a great plan. You know, I would think that being a focal point at the corner there, we would have some sort of remote access capabilities for pedestrian visitors or guests of the building, so that they can enter what we're going to hopefully build as a grand entrance. And then potentially maybe give a code or some sort of badge system that requires Uber Eats and other quick delivery concepts to use the kind of in-house behind the scenes access door. I think we can definitely try to figure that out, and we can hopefully solve for that.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that's something that sounds like you could pursue it, and I would welcome thoughts from staff or from my colleagues about whether it's appropriate to include something like that as a proposed condition.
Thank you, Amelia. Does anybody else have any comments or questions before I open it up to public testimony? And I do want to remind members of the public who are here for both this case and for future cases that the only testimony that the planning board entertains are written testimony that is officially submitted, as well as oral testimony that is presented at the hearing. Anything else is not monitored and is not part of the public record, is not something the planning board considers. So to the extent that you want to provide testimony on an application, those are the two ways by which you can do it. So if there are no other comments or questions by members of the planning board, I would invite members of the public who want to provide testimony in support of this application to please exercise the raised hand button next to your name or above your name, however it's looked at on your end of this platform. I will call on you in the order in which I see you. So the first hand, and by the way, because we have a very long meeting this evening, does a member of staff have a timer that we can exercise?
This is Raisa speaking. Would you like for us to share a timer on screen?
I would, please. I'm gonna limit oral testimony to 2 minutes per person, and that's going to be uniform throughout the evening, so we can get out of here before tomorrow.
This is Raisa speaking. Emily Hutchings will be sharing her screen to show the timer. Emily, if you could share your screen, please. Thank you.
My apologies, you caught me slightly off guard. One moment.
That's okay.
I am having just a bit of trouble sharing my screen.
Okay, we see it.
There we go. Can you see the timer?
I can.
Excellent.
This is Raisa speaking. We do see the timer.
Perfect. All right.
Thank you.
I'm gonna ask anybody who wants to speak in support of the application to raise a hand. Right now, I see one person with their hand raised. And I will ask anybody that's going to be providing oral testimony to please give your name and your address for the record, please. So I would like to recognize Aaron Weber for 2 minutes.
This is Raisa speaking. Aaron, you have been unmuted. You're self-muted on your end.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
My name is Aaron Weber. I live at 32 Summit Avenue in Somerville. I'm speaking in favor of this application because we're in a housing crisis and we should act with the urgency that a crisis requires. Excessive delays drive up the price of housing, and we've seen some really heartbreaking situations throughout our community that are displacing people up and down the income scale, and please move forward with all deliberate speed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weber. I see Tori Antonino. Tori, would please be unmuted.
This is Raisa speaking. Tori, you have been unmuted. You are self-muted on your end.
Okay, perfect. Good evening, everybody. I'm here for a different agenda item, but I figured I'd weigh in. My name is Tori Antonino. I live at 65 Boston Street. I'm just kind of run through like greatest hits, and I heard Rolla, so hi Rolla. If you're thinking of any sort of any vines, please consider native plants. Instead of a Boston ivy, you replace that with Virginia creeper. It has a lot more ecosystem value. If you want, if you were thinking of doing a trellis and putting a vine in that doesn't sucker, that twirls, you want to think about your Clematis virginiana, your Virgin's bower, and you want to think about your coral honeysuckle, the Lonicera sempervirens. It makes wonderful screening, helps cool the building. It's almost a no-brainer, and it increases the value of your property, and it makes it more beautiful. I was curious about, I didn't see any green roofs, but perhaps there's photovoltaic. I haven't reviewed the plans. We, of course, encourage both. Thank you for providing balcony space. Outdoor amenity space is something we really underestimate our need for. Just being outside, being able to watch the world go by, it really regenerates us. Being just outside, being around a lot of nature is really what helps feed our souls. So, and just moving forward for all types of these, mid-rise apartments, we're planning for, I fear that we're planning for a transient population. There was a total of 3 bedrooms, and I imagine they're for affordable housing, and 20 2 bedrooms, pretty sure. And the rest were studies and single bedrooms. So I just want to remember that we are in a family housing crisis as well, and an affordable housing crisis. And so we have to think about families because they're the anchor for our community. Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you very much, Tori. I'm looking for other hands. Right now, scrolling through, I do not see any, but going once, going twice, seeing no more hands up, I will close that portion of the public hearing. I will open it up to anybody that wants to speak in opposition to the application or otherwise express concern for it.
This is Raisa speaking. I do not see any raised hands.
At this time, I do not either. 1, 2, 3. I will close that portion of the public hearing, and we will keep the written record open for anybody that wants to submit written testimony to planning@somervillema.gov. We will keep it open until Friday the 12th at noon. Next meeting of the planning board will be on Thursday the 18th. So with that portion of the hearing ending, if nobody else on the planning board has any comments or questions for the applicant or staff, I think the applicant will be coming back to us in a period of time with a revised rendering of the rear of the building. And so I thank the applicant for their time. And I see Aaron's hand. Do
Oh.
I? Did I?
Yeah, yeah, thank you. The unmute got buried. Just a couple comments to the applicant or maybe questions. First, I noticed the number of bicycle parking spots is 42. So I'll start off with this. I appreciate you bringing a residential building. It is something we desperately need in Somerville, so thank you for that. So just to lay that groundwork, right? So this is how do we make a very good residential building that we can have for years to come. So bicycle parking spots, I noticed you have 42 for a 42 unit building, especially when you have these sort of close proximity to East Somerville, East Cambridge, very bikeable areas. I am mildly concerned that you might run up against issues with bike parking, like enough. So I would maybe encourage the applicant team to consider, ways to convert, say, a parking spot into more bike spaces in a year's time if they notice there are, too few bicycle spots. And then the sort of second question, in the neighborhood meetings, there was a lot of discussion back and forth about burying the power lines. And if I recall, we discussed that some at last meeting, but didn't get into some of the details of why that's hard to do. I think that was more a comment for staff and the city on the amount of expertise that we have for being able to bury power lines. So this is maybe a general comment. If there's time next meeting, I would love to hear more from the applicant about the difficulties behind that. So as one board member, I can understand some of those challenges better. So 2 comments: bicycle parking, especially given the site of the development, and then 2, understanding the power line challenges.
Aaron, thank you very much. Anybody else before we move to continue this to a future meeting? Yes, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a quick question regarding the affordable housing component for the applicant. And the question really involves the level of access. So I know that about 20% of the project is allocated to affordable housing. Would the applicant be willing to discuss those affordable housing units having access to the bicycle spaces, the parking spaces, as well as the amenities? I would love to hear a clarification on that. Thank you.
Yes, I think that is the plan. Attorney Nick Zazula, McDermott, Quilty, and Miller. I don't think that was not the plan. We have one-to-one parking, so we were planning on having 1 unit per parking space. This is a condo building, so parking is a little bit more expected, I guess is the right word, for residents versus a rental building. At least that's what our research has shown through the developer. I'll let Mr. DiBiase answer if he wants to clarify anything that I have said, but I don't think we were planning on excluding anybody from any of the units. I don't even think that's from any of the amenity spaces. I don't even think that's illegal, but I don't think that was our plan either way. But you go if you want to clarify.
Yes, this is Hugo DiBiase again with the ownership team. So we've had conversations with the City of Somerville's affordable housing group, and we have discussed this. Absolutely, there'll be no restrictions on any of the common amenities within the entire property. That's bike parking, that's roof deck access, that's all. Each and every affordable unit owner will be a homeowner. They'll have a % interest in the HOA, and they'll have voting rights and everything else that a typical homeowner would also have. So the parking will be unbundled. So our intent is to try to make it as efficient as possible for people that need it, and then for people that don't need it, so that we can hopefully maximize efficiency for all the parking spaces.
Thank you. Thank you so much to the applicant, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the clarification.
Thank you very much. If there is no further discussion by members of the board this evening at this time, the chair moves to continue this agenda item to the 18th, seconded by Aaron. Chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Gahan votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
All right, this item is continued to the 18th. And again, written testimony is open until the 12th at noon. Planning at somervillema.gov by email. Next item on our agenda, knocking the.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Is 50 Webster Avenue, the subdivision. Sounds like a sequel to a movie that happened before, right? Yeah. So if we could please have the applicant for 50 Webster Avenue be unmuted, and before that, Amelia, do you need to?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be recusing myself from this item.
Okay. And it is my understanding that despite Amelia's recusal, that we still have a quorum to open here and deliberate on this item on the agenda. So if the applicant can identify themselves, I see one person that I'm going to rely on.
This is Bryce speaking.
Yep.
I see Justin Coons. His hand is raised. I will make you the presenter. Justin, you should be able to share your screen.
Thank you, Raisa. Can you hear me?
This is Bryce speaking. We can hear you.
Excellent. Good evening, Mr. Chair and board members. My name is Justin Coons. I'm a development manager for US2, the designated master developer of Union Square with offices at 31 Union Square. Thankful for the opportunity to provide some background on the application for subdivision plan approval before you tonight, and will endeavor to do so briefly with just 4 slides. To ground us all in the location, the subject parcel is address 50 Webster Avenue as identified with the pink border in the image here. It is located immediately south of the recently completed Union Square Green Line station with western frontages on Prospect Street and Webster Avenue. With our phase 1 projects, or D2, currently under construction north of the railroad right-of-way, 50 Webster, its subdivision and future development projects will commence phase 2 and support neighborhood and area connections south of the tracks. From a land use perspective, the approved coordinated development special permit represents the starting point for this parcel, a massing diagram of which is depicted here. It's labeled as D3.1 in this instance. It's located in a high-rise district, and this parcel was permitted to host a commercial building. As you see, a civic open space that would increase the building's separation from the public way, and an alley. To achieve this end, preliminary platting was approved at that time to support these uses, which is shown here. You see at right the subset of the D3 block, which is the 50 Webster Avenue parcel. It was to be composed of 3 lots, a building lot in gray, a civic space lot of at least 15,975 square feet, and a thoroughfare lot. And then lastly, to introduce the proposal before you, the platting here delivers on these objectives. Specifically, it does so with the creation of 3 lots, dividing the roughly 1.5 acre parcel. It will in turn define a framework for subsequent development review of each of these, a future open space of over 16,000 square feet, a commercial building, and a thoroughfare. with that, happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I don't have any questions right now. I do have a very brief comment for both the applicant and for my two other members of the board. Had this project been a smaller project, subdivisions are generally considered the purview of planning staff and the planning director. It's only when it's of, a scale kind of this that it gets kicked over to us. So subdivisions tend to be something that because it's site plan approval, that we can have some input in, but not all that much, largely because it's seen as an administrative application. We will of course have much more to say with the substantive portions of the application that will come within those subdivided parcels. I just wanted to put this into kind of perspective for members of the board. With that, do either of you have any comments or questions for the applicant or of staff on this particular application? Okay, seeing none, what I'm going to do is open it up to members of the public that want to speak in support of this application. Reminder, this is for the subdivision only. So for anybody that wants to speak in support of the application, I would ask you to please exercise the raise hand button, and I'll call on you in the order in which I see you. Once, going twice. Seeing none, I will close that portion of the public hearing, and I will open it up to members of the public that want to testify in opposition to the proposal for a subdivision or otherwise express concern for the subdivision. Please exercise your raised hand. Going once and going twice. 3 times. I see no hands raised. I will close that portion of the public hearing. I think this is, I will just speak for myself as one member of the board. I think this is fairly uncontroversial. I think there will be more discussion to be had when substantive applications within those subdivisions are made. But for now, I think this is the first step in the process for us to be able to have a broader conversation about what will be happening in what is it, D3. Does anybody have anything further to add at this time? I want to thank the applicant for the application, and following public testimony, review of the submitted materials and deliberation of the required considerations outlined in some of the zoning ordinance, I move to approve with conditions the subdivision plan approval in the high-rise zoning district, seconded by Aaron. The chair votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Congratulations, good luck, and we will see you with subsequent applications in the future. I appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night. The next several items on our agenda, I will just go over it again, will be Elm Street and Grove Street, which is one application, as well as a presentation on the submission requirements manual, award council of representation amendment. But we also have a discussion by Sarah Lewis, who I believe is here. Sarah Hill?
This is Risa speaking. I believe Dan Bartman will be doing that portion instead.
Okay.
Also, I wanted to update that.
Can I ask this, Risa? Before we move into Davis Square land, I would like to just take a 4-minute recess because I have a feeling we will have some substantive discussion, and I just want to make sure that everybody is fully rested for a little bit of time. So I'm going to put the planning board in recess until 7:30, when we will reconvene to discuss a brief presentation by Dan and then a presentation by the applicant. And Amelia has rejoined us, only to be put into recess. Welcome back. I'll see you later. See you all in a few minutes. And we're back. It is 7:31. The planning board is back in session. So we likely have a large number of people who will want to present testimony this evening. this is the beginning of the process. We do not have a covenant between the applicant and the city yet. I think there will be a lot of consideration that we will have to take as that process moves forward, in addition to anything that the applicant may modify as a result of testimony. So what I would propose for an application kind of this scale and of this significance, that we take a presentation by the applicant, take public testimony, and then consider reserving any questions or comments that we have outside of anything that is substantive until maybe the next time we convene on this matter to see how, if at all, our concerns are addressed. Because I have a feeling that based on the package that the planning board got that reflected the reports from the various neighborhood meetings, that there may be some modifications on this application based on what we saw was kind of several consistent themes in those meetings. That's a proposal that I have, is that we take everybody that is kind of more important than us first and see where we are. Because this is certainly not going to be a night where we're going to make a vote. It may be some time before we get to that place. And I think this is, like I said, the beginning of the discussion and the process on this application, because I think there are a lot of unanswered issues around the application and the neighborhood plan generally. So what I'd like to do is, I think I heard before we took a recess that Dan was going to step in for the shoes of Sarah and make a brief presentation on the status of the Davis Square neighborhood plan, because that is, for brief background, at least for me, and I know Dan will give probably a more fulsome one. This is something that's been in discussion since well before the pandemic. And I think it is more than germane for this application to have that plan be put into context and the status of it by members of the staff. So I would welcome Dan to please be unmuted, share a screen if needed, and otherwise make a presentation to the board and to the public.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to apologize. I actually don't have a presentation to give, but I can verbally share with you where we're at. I think the first place to start is that when we announced we were re-looking at the Davis Square neighborhood plan, what we realized is how much of its text was written in a context that was pre-pandemic, pre-2020, and how much it read out of date with the current state and the situations that Davis Square finds itself in today. Even if many of the goals and objectives of the community of Davis Square remain similar to what they were in previous planning meetings where we gathered feedback on the planning process and the trajectory of the neighborhood. So we took this opportunity to actually rewrite the Davis Square neighborhood plan, reorganize it as a commercial area plan that focuses on the business core rather than the neighborhood as a whole. So for example, the plan does not have content about neighborhood properties that are in the NR district, far away from the business core of Davis Square. The properties all fronting Elm and Highland, Holland College. That's what I mean by the business core. I wish I was aware that I'd be given this update today, or I'd bring a map with me. But we were writing a plan. We had a plan previously that was for a larger area, and we've zeroed in its focus because the feedback actually is very much focused on the economy, the public realm of the business core, and how things continue to maintain the character or contribute towards the character of Davis Square, even if redevelopment is happening. And we've taken the opportunity to refocus the plan on that type of content and using all of the public feedback we received over the years as the baseline of what we're writing into that plan. With the nuance that I'll add, that the Economic Development Division has taken extreme care to spend a lot of time and energy on addressing recovery from the pandemic and its impact on small businesses. So you can expect a plan that will be very much focused on the economic development future of Davis Square as its primary chapter. And I would say as the secondary chapter, a focus on the public realm, the design of sidewalks, the upkeep and repair of various physical features of Davis Square, from light posts to bricks to signage that needs our attention, and the improvement of public spaces like Seven Hills Park, and the creation of new public spaces, or redesign of existing public spaces like the plaza that is involved with another nearby development proposal that's not in front of you yet, but we are all aware it's coming. Aside from that, there is also content about design guidelines for buildings that was in the plan previously. But I would say that the majority of the plan is now focused on economic development and public realm improvements. From a focus of the planning division, another item that I should update everybody on is that we have recently promoted Victor Nascimento, our former outreach coordinator, to senior planner, with a focus on managing all of the planning processes. As we know, Rebecca has taken another position in another division, another department in the city, and Victor is assuming her responsibilities. Now that Assembly Square has effectively wound down, Victor's focus is now on finishing the Davis Square plan, and that is what he works on a daily basis. Also, in light of that, I can tell you that other divisions are now moving forward on items that are included or talked about in the Davis Square plan that take them years of runway to get moving. For instance, Brad Rawson and the Mobility Division included in their yearly budget for this year a line item to do the study necessary to understand how traffic might need to be rerouted in Davis Square if and to what extent Elm Street might be pedestrianized. So the neighborhood plan explores the idea of pedestrianizing Elm Street, doesn't claim to know all of the answers that need to be uncovered about what such a project might entail for the neighborhood, but does illuminate us on what is necessary to get to those answers. For instance, hiring this type of consultant, doing an intersection analysis, a traffic rerouting analysis, all of that has to be understood. We need to know where the utilities would go if we were to pedestrianize parts of Elm Street. So the plan will provide things like what are different opportunities available for different scales of pedestrianizing Elm Street, for example. We just had the other week I'd call it an internal workshop amongst the engineering department, the mobility division, the economic development division, and planning and zoning to, I'd say, have a more advanced conversation about what all of that entails. And one of the things that I think is important for the project that's in front of you tonight is that we consider the new normal amongst the administration, the new normal for Elm Street, to include widened sidewalks that absorb the parklets that are currently in the parking lane and a single flow of traffic in the interim until the extent of a pedestrianized Elm Street project is concluded outside of this planning process as a follow-up implementation process. But that this, the SCAPE project, which you all will review later tonight, is required through condition to improve the sidewalks, but that'll be for the interim version of what will take place in between the construction of their building and the city following behind it to either return Elm Street to a version that's more like what's on the ground today with all of the parklets that we learned to permit during the pandemic as a baseline, and then potentially moving to turn Elm Street into a potentially a more plaza-like. And I don't know the extent of where that will go, but the plan will cover what the possibilities are. And that could include anything from the main intersection to Grove Street, the main intersection all the way to Cutter Street, adding a plaza at the end of where, if it extends the whole way down there in front of the that bank and the newer building that's been built in the last 10 years. So that's kind of the trajectory of the Davis Square plan. It still needs some work from a transportation and mobility perspective and engineering. So these are like the hard questions that are still left related to rerouting traffic and figuring out how to make the sewer still work if we turn a street into a plaza. And the issues will be covered in the plan. What is necessary to answer the questions about those issues will be covered in the plan. What we recommend as further next steps for the other departments to take will be included in the plan. But a predetermined outcome of the answer of should Elm Street be pedestrianized and to what extent isn't determined by the plan. It directs us on how to keep moving forward on that project. So I do want to highlight how important that's become and how much of a focus the economic development section has been. It is really written towards with a focus on small businesses, and anti-displacement efforts, relocation efforts when redevelopment does happen. Many of the things that you've probably heard or that I know have happened in the behind the scenes related to the development projects that are happening in Davis Square. And one thing I'll highlight is that even though we don't have an adopted plan yet, I do know that the developers working in Davis Square have worked really closely with everybody in OSPCD to make sure that their proposals are in line with our goals for Davis Square, even though we don't have a published document yet. So they have worked very closely with us. I'll remind everybody that these new buildings that are coming are subject to the small business overlay district, that it ensures that all the small commercial spaces that we're trying to get on the ground floors here are provided. And I think that's, without me rambling on and on much longer, I think that that's probably an update of where we're at. I do know Victor's goal is to try and have a public draft out by the end of summer. And we do consider this to be a rewrite of the neighborhood's goals and objectives, but that we want to come back and talk to them about anything that's missing, because the last public meeting we've had with them is at least 4 years ago now at this point. So we have been writing a document that we think reflects their wishes to date, but that we are not going to just impose it upon them without further public engagement. So that we do plan to hold public meetings to talk about this kind of as the foundation for the new version of the plan, and to discuss if there's anything else that would like to be included in it.
And I appreciate that, because I was going to, ask you to specify how and how much public input is going to be made on some of the thoughts for modification of how Davis Square looks and moves and feels. I know that, yes, I'm a member of the planning board, but yes, I also, travel to and through Davis Square every day. So I think it's obviously critical for, for this to be an immensely, public input heavy process. So I appreciate that kind of update that you have. Does anybody from the board have any comments or questions of Dan? Yes, Amelia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I just wanted to thank you for also explaining in that process update that staff is attentive to the priorities and sort of future conditions in the neighborhood plan when reviewing these upcoming projects that you're working with the applicants on. My primary concern was sort of understanding that not having an adopted neighborhood plan would not prevent us from acting on what we know are the intentions and goals of the community from the earlier stages of the process. And I'm glad to hear that staff is already coordinating to that effect. Thank you.
Anybody else before we release Dan for the evening, or at least this portion of the evening? I don't know if you've got more for us later. Okay, seeing none. Dan, if you want to stick around, you are more than welcome. I don't know if you've got anything more for us later tonight. If not, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. I believe that's all for me tonight.
Okay, have a nice night.
Evening.
Okay, what I'm going to do now is look at my handy agenda, and I'm going to ask the applicant at 231 Elm to 249 Elm, and then a couple of addresses on Grove Street, which are all part of the same address, to be unmuted and shared and have an opportunity to present.
This is Raisa speaking. Brett Benson will be their presenter tonight.
Before I let you do that, I'm just, I'm gonna let you finish, but, pull on Kanye. No, I'm gonna have the applicant present, then I'm gonna take testimony, and then I'm gonna see where we are on this.
This is Raisa speaking. Brett Benson, you have been made into the presenter. You're free to share your screen. And I also know that Andrew Flynn will also be a speaker tonight. You've also been unmuted on your end.
Good evening. This is Andrew Flynn. And first and foremost, I just want to say thank you to the members of the planning board and to the chair for your time this evening and for allowing us the opportunity to present. What we'll present tonight reflects 3 years of close kind of coordination and collaboration with various members of staff and various stakeholders from across the neighborhood and the city. And in particular, we want to say thank you to Dan Bartman and his team for working very closely with us in helping guide the process and align the project with the goals of the Davis Square plan. I'm going to turn it over to Brett Benson to run through the presentation, and then we look forward to engaging in a further discussion. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, everybody. Can everybody see my screen? It should be loading now, and you should have an image of the project with the address on the front.
Yes.
Great, thank you so much. I'm new to GoToMeeting. So good evening, everybody. My name is Brett Benson, and I'm a principal at UTIL, a Boston-based architecture and urban design firm. Our offices are located on Kingston Street in downtown Boston. And I want to thank the board in advance for your time tonight. I know it's been a busy night so far, and there'll be more things for you all to discuss later on, so I'll try to be brief in presenting this project. Just to orient everyone to the site, we're located a half block from Davis Square on Elm Street, extending from the Burr to Grove Street and around to number 20 Grove. And as designers, we're really incredibly honored and humbled to be working in Davis Square. It's really a special place in Somerville, and we're excited to share our design for a building that fits comfortably into the square. The proposed building is 4 stories tall with ground floor retail and lab or office space on the upper floors, approximately 128,000 square feet in all. It includes public underground car parking and bike parking for tenants in the public. The project will be LEED Platinum certifiable and is fully zoning compliant, including the mechanical penthouse and small scale retail amendments. And as you can see here, the existing structures on site are primarily 1-story retail fronting on Elm Street. The Grove Street side of the site is less vibrant than Elm, primarily parking lot fronting on the street with sidewalks that have significant maintenance needs. And the Burren is located on the Elm Street side of the site, and it's an important cultural landmark in Davis Square. And the development team is committed to keeping the Burren open during construction and to restoring the facade of the building. And we've worked diligently with the Historic Preservation Commission and its staff to detail our approach to preservation. At a neighborhood level, the project has many benefits to offer the community. First, the employees working in the 3 floors of commercial space above will provide increased foot traffic to support local retail and restaurants throughout the day, strengthening the square as an 18-hour destination. At the street level, small scale retail spaces will support the commercial life of the square, and a preserved burn will continue to be a cultural anchor. The retail will be supported with expanded sidewalks that are fully accessible and furnished with 28 bike parking spaces, and an underground parking garage will be open to the public and equipped with electric vehicle chargers. From a sustainability standpoint, the building will be LEED Platinum, which is a high hurdle for a building of this type, but part of the city's aggressive goals to combat climate change. And I want to highlight a couple of our approaches. First and foremost, we're going to reduce energy use as much as possible. This includes on-site energy production through solar panels, prioritizing electric HVAC systems, and having a very high performance building envelope. We're not building an inefficient glass box on this site. We're also focused on stormwater, collecting rainwater in an underground cistern that will provide gray water for irrigation and toilet flushing. The green roof will use native species to reduce water use and reduce the urban heat island effect. But beyond the built environment, the cultural life of Davis Square is a critical part of the context. The connection between the sidewalks and the small scale businesses, the blurred edges between the public realm and the retail, it's all a unique part of the square and one we want to continue along Elm Street. And by the same token, we see an opportunity on Grove Street to bring some of the intellectual vibrancy of the commercial tenants upstairs down to street level with a conference center. And for this, Greentown Labs is a great precedent for connecting the public realm to the innovation happening inside. At our community meetings and in the Urban Design Commission review, there was an insightful suggestion to carefully study the scale and design of existing Davis Square storefronts to provide context to our design proposal. So we walked around Davis Square documenting successful storefronts that capture the flavor of the square. And there's some important common ingredients that we've incorporated into our storefront design. First, there's a frame, usually masonry, that organizes the storefront into a more cohesive composition. There's a storefront zone of transparent glass set within the frame. And there's a range of narrow storefront widths that articulate these bays. And we've kept these studies in mind as we've designed the storefronts for this project. The storefronts are framed by a rhythm of brick pillars. The awnings will bring variety in signage and colors and keep the storefront glass to a pedestrian scale to 9 feet high. The retail spaces are narrow, approximately 16 feet wide, to promote small businesses and a dense and varied retail mix at the sidewalk. And we anticipate the storefronts will have sliding and accordion glass windows and even garage doors, so the public realm really extends into the ground floor of the building along Elm Street. And looking at the building from the corner of Elm and Grove, you can see we have rounded the corner of the building at the intersection. We heard from many people how the existing building makes a dangerous intersection by hiding traffic at the corner. So we've pulled the building 20 feet back from the property line at the corner to improve visibility and give more breathing room to the intersection. We've also set the building back all along Elm and Grove to maintain 12-foot sidewalks. In this view, you can also start to see some of the special brick detailing we've incorporated into the design. There are rounded brick pilasters at each storefront bay with corbel details to bring a sense of texture to the street level. And looking at the Elm Street elevation, you can see how the design is a quiet brick facade with individual windows inspired by historic mill buildings found around Somerville and Boston. On the left, you'll see the Burn building that has been preserved with the simple glass facade of the new construction set back from the historic facade below. And beyond the Burn, the upper floors of the building continue the brick detailing introduced at street level. Brick arches top each window in the building, and brick corbelling at the top floor introduces a play of light and shadow across the facade. And this brick facade continues around the corner to Grove Street until it steps down at the east corner of the building in deference to the neighboring apartments at 20 Grove Street. And at the ground floor, retail space holds the corner at Elm Street, at the Elm Street intersection on the lower left. And in the center, the entrance and lobby for the upper floor commercial is located next to a glassy conference center, which we expect to be busy only during daytime hours. And the off-street loading and public garage entrance are located in the lower right. Overall, the building transitions from being more active along Elm Street to more quiet along Grove Street. And looking at the view from Grove Street in 3 dimensions, you can see the garage entrance is set back from the street. The windows facing the neighboring property are smaller than other areas of the facade to enhance privacy for our neighbor. And Grove Street also has the greatest transformation of the public realm, where we are more than doubling the sidewalk width and introducing native street trees, bike racks, stormwater improvements, and a fully accessible sidewalk. And looking back at the corner of Elm and Grove, you can see our desire to create a quiet but finely detailed building that fits very comfortably in the context of Davis Square. We want the upper floors to play a supporting role to a vibrant street life with small scale retail and a pedestrian friendly streetscape. And at the sidewalk level, there are 3 existing trees on Elm Street that we will be protecting throughout construction that you see here, 2 in front of the burn and 1 at the Grove Street corner. And these will be infilled with new mature trees along Elm and Grove, so the sidewalk continues to be leafy and comfortable for pedestrians. And then looking at the ground floor plan, you can see the burn on the left side of the plan remaining in place with a line of small scale retail running along Elm Street. At Grove Street, a slightly larger retail space anchors the corner, and you can see the extent to which the building is pulled back to provide more open space at this busy intersection. Continuing along Grove, the lobby for the upper floor commercial space is shown slightly set back from the sidewalk, along with the public garage entrance in the loading area. This loading area will serve all of the retail tenants on the ground floor through an internal service corridor, so deliveries to these spaces can happen entirely off-street. We're also proposing a set of shared bathrooms for the retail spaces, so tenants don't have to spend money or valuable square footage for this infrastructure. And looking at the sidewalks, you can see the three existing trees that we will be preserving, as well as the new street trees along Elm and Grove. We'll provide new street furnishings, bike racks, and crosswalk ramps with detectable warning strips. And the bike racks will continue along Elm at regular intervals for convenient access to the retail spaces. Now, we're also proposing planters in front of each storefront to make the sidewalks very rich and inviting. And with that, I'll wrap up our presentation and thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I thought it was informative. As I indicated before you started your presentation, I think it makes the most amount of sense for us to take because of the kind of unique, one of the somewhat unique natures of this particular application. I want to take some public testimony first. We have gotten some notes from neighborhood meetings, and I think that has informed some of how I look at the application, some of the questions I have. But what I think would most inform me is not only your application, but also oral testimony. And what I imagine we will get is a decent amount of written testimony on this over the next couple of weeks. So I also know that the applicant is in the process of trying to figure out what they're going to be doing with a covenant as it relates to the city. And it's the practice of the planning board to not take action on an application until the covenant has been resolved or not. So I'm going to reserve comments and questions that I've got at this time, because I'd like to see where we are as a neighborhood first. So I don't know if anybody on the board has any comments or questions of the applicant or of the staff at this time that they'd like to raise before we hear from folks that want to testify. Erin, are you trying to say something? Okay.
Nope. Sorry, background.
That's okay. All right, thank you. So what I'd like to do now is thank the applicant very much for the presentation. I thought it was informative and helpful, and I would like to move on to opening the public hearing to public testimony. So next to your names is a raised hand button. If you would like to provide testimony on the application in support of the application, please exercise the raised hand button and I'll call on you in the order in which I see you. And because I have a feeling we'll have a number of people that would like to speak, I would like to ask for a 2-minute timer to be put up again, kind of in contemplation of the time and in respect for all the people that want to speak. So anybody that wants to speak in support of the application, please raise your hand.
This is Raisa speaking. I do not see any raised hands at this time.
At this time, I see 1, 2, 3, 4. So the first one I saw was Tori Antonino, so I'd like for Tori to please be unmuted and stop the clock. Not just for Tori, for everybody.
This is Raisa speaking. Tori, you have been unmuted. You're self-muted on your end. Please state your name and address for the record before speaking, please.
Hi, my name is Tori Antonino. I live at 65 Boston Street in Somerville. I just want to, I guess, commend the staff for pivoting in terms of what Davis Square needs and meeting the moment, especially in a post-COVID world. I look forward to working on the Davis Square plan. Oh, excuse me, baby. I do, when a covenant is developed with this, with the applicant, I hope to see some sort of community center involved in the agreement. It's just something that every one of our squares is in desperate need for, and it is a standard practice in Boston. There's a zoning ordinance that I'm looking to steal that can help really just codify it in other areas that are not just in a master plan special permit overlay. Okay, and that's all I have to say for now. I'll have a good night, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Tori, very much. The next I saw was Robert Gorin. So Mr. Gorin, could you please be unmuted?
This is Raisa speaking. Robert Gorin, you have been unmuted.
Yes, we are abutters at 255 Elm Street to this project. We are very interested in some areas of it. What are the plans that are going to be produced on the top floor? And I am very pleased that they are going to have space available to small individual shop owners. That's very nice. We are next door to the building. We have an alley between us. Absolutely like the plan, and we'd like to find out other things, what we'd like to do.
That covers it.
I think that covers it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, board. Appreciate it. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Gorin. The next I see up on my list is Lee Osmonds.
This is Raisa speaking. Lee, you have been unmuted. You may be self-muted on your end, Lee.
How's that? I'm Lee Auspitz at 17 Chapel Street. I'd just first like to say I support this project and the many adaptations that they've made physically to fit it into the spirit and aesthetics of the neighborhood. I have one very large reservation, which is both one for the city and for the developer. The city makes no distinction between high-risk labs and low-risk labs, and the developer's lawyer expressed strong intention to put a level 3 lab with a 20-foot penthouse. A level 3 is work on highly contagious airborne diseases such as anthrax, tuberculosis, COVID, and influenza. I would request that the city make part of its covenant that such labs not be in this building, even though by right they may be. It's a loophole in the zoning code. Secondly, in the public meeting, a retired member from the Harvard chemistry department pointed out the toxic chemical labs could be put by right in accordance with the zoning regulation. And here too, I think there's need for a covenant. This building was targeted way back as in need of upgrading this whole stretch, and I think the developers have done a good job on the physical side. Thank you.
Steve, thanks very much. I see Mr. Goran's hand is still raised, but we already called on you, so that's your time. Next I see up is Aaron Weber.
This is Rice speaking. Aaron, you are unmuted.
Thank you. My name is Aaron Weber. I'm at 32 Summit Avenue. I'm very impressed with a lot of the aspects of this design. I really like the way that you've daylighted that intersection to improve safety. I approve of the replacement of the unsightly surface parking lots on Grove Street. My sole concern is that we should go taller. If we're going to have the disruption of construction right in the heart of the square, let's at least get 6 stories of tax base and jobs out of it. Congratulations, it looks wonderful. Have a great afternoon or evening, and that's all my testimony.
Aaron, thanks very much. I am going to give another few seconds for anybody that wants to raise their hand to speak in support of the application. Going once, going twice. Seeing none, I will close that portion of the public hearing. I will open it up to anybody that wants to speak in opposition to the application or otherwise express concern. Please raise your hand and I'll call on you in the order in which I see you. Right now I see one person. I would like to recognize Douglas Sherman, who was the first hand that I saw.
This is Rice speaking. Douglas, you have been unmuted. You are self-muted on your end.
And again, for the record, please list your name and address. Mr. Sherman, are you there? I said, do we know if Mr. Sherman is clear on our end?
This is Rice speaking. I do not know if he is having technical issues. Douglas, are you there?
To the extent that we might have technical issues, which sometimes happens here, the board is absolutely keeping written comment open for a period of time. So if somebody's technical issues prevent them from being able to provide oral testimony, they can absolutely provide that testimony via email in the next week or so. So I'm looking once again, I see Alex Giller. So if Alex Giller could please be unmuted and provide testimony, please, on the clock.
This is Rice speaking. Alex, you have been unmuted. You are all good.
Thank you very much, Chairman and other members of the board. My name is Alex Skiller. I'm a property owner in Davis Square. I'm actually a Medford resident myself, moved out of Somerville very recently. I've actually had the pleasure of watching stumbling across it based upon other projects where I've been at the historical committee and now this committee as well, where I'm here for other things. And the detail that they are going through to keep this building as accurate as possible is wonderful. And I honestly feel like having the glass section above the burn is just an absolute miss in their design. And it's just kind of a personal belief. I mean, the laser detailing that they're going to take notes on, I honestly think is absolutely wonderful, and I applaud them for the efforts that they're going to make. But the burn is, I mean, it's always just kind of been this nice kind of dark, if you will, structure. And then to kind of have an open air glass above it, it just, all their efforts to preserve the brick and then cap it off with glass, I think is just kind of an odd combination. And then one other comment I'd like to make is, I think it's kind of strange. I know Davis Square is trying to move away in Somerville as a whole from a car-centric society, but it's still part of our society as a whole right now. To take away the 20 or so parking spots that are on Grove Street, and I think they said 60 something in total were going to be in the parking garage. I could be wrong on that number. That means there's only 40 spots for the entire building, both retail and office space. However, that's going to be broken up. I just don't really think that that's enough to meet the demand of the structure that they're building, plus the current demand that the parking lot has. So I'd just like to kind of see what they project in terms of the breakdown of all those parking spots between public and then deeded for what they're doing on the upper stories plus the retail. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Giller, I'm not sure if you provided your address for the record.
So I'm a Medford resident. I live in 55 Forest Street, Medford, right in Medford Center. I have properties on Lexington Ave, Electric Avenue, and Powder House Boulevard.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I am scrolling through to make sure I'm not missing anybody whose hand may or may not be raised. Thought I saw one and then it went away. So I am gonna go once.
This is Rice speaking. I did see Kendra Gahagan raise her hand.
I do not see that person, but I do see Susan Kinsella, who has raised her hand. So if Susan Kinsella could please be unmuted and please provide her name and address for the record.
This is Rice speaking. Suzanne, you have been unmuted.
Susan, are you there? Susan seems to have maybe the same issue that the individual a few minutes ago had as well. I'm going to give Susan another, right, so just to be clear, we're good on our end, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to give Susan another second to see if she can get her microphone or phone or whatever to work. And if she cannot, I will invite her to submit written testimony. Okay. Susan, can you hear us? Okay. Susan, I'm going to invite you to submit written testimony then to planning@somervillema.gov, just because this sometimes unfortunately happens with remote meetings, and you will absolutely have your opportunity to present testimony to the board, but unfortunately, kind of the technical issues are preventing that right now. The next person I see is Ian Montgomery. So if Ian Montgomery could please be unmuted, and if Ian could give a name and address for the record, hopefully we'll be able to hear that.
This is Rice speaking. Ian, you have been unmuted. You may be self-muted on your end.
Hi, I'm Ian Montgomery. I'm on 97 Holland Street, Pullman L, so right local. I did want to first give a congratulations. I actually do like a lot of the building plan, and the new trees and stuff I think would be great for Davis Square. I did want to address my concern. I know I'm a little late to the party, but I am still just wanted to express my disappointment that there is no housing going into Davis. It is a super expensive place to live, and to see a big building going up with absolutely no housing in it, I just wanted to say that that's kind of a disappointment to me. But no, thank you for your time, and I do appreciate the care that you guys put into this facade in the front. I think the brick looks very good.
Ian, thanks very much for your testimony. A couple of things on it. I'm going to try to recognize, all the hands are moving. I just saw somebody. Can we try Susan Kinsella again? Because she's still got her.
This is Raisa speaking. Suzanne, we have unmuted you. You are self-muted on your end. This is Raisa speaking. Mr. Chair, she's still unmuted, self-muted on her end.
Okay. I'm looking to see if because I saw a couple of other hands go up and then go down, so I just want to make sure that we're not canceling people out before they have a chance to keep their hand raised. If you want to testify, I see Kendra Gagan. So while Kendra's hand is still up, let's see if we can please unmute her and allow her to present testimony.
This is Raisa speaking. Kendra, you have been unmuted. You are self-muted on your end.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for your careful attention to this proposal. We all really appreciate it. I'm at 20 Grove Street, so I'm literally in the building and all the schematics right next to where this building is going to go. So my neighbors and I are very concerned about this project. I attended several of the last public meetings that were held by UTIL and SCAPE, and we did not get sufficient answers despite multiple questions from constituents and neighbors about who the tenants will be in this building. When they describe it as a medical lab, they told us at the last meeting there were no confirmed tenants yet, and so we're concerned about the kind of work. I want to second what Lee Auspitz said, that the biosafety level 3 work is of great concern in such a densely populated neighborhood. I believe Somerville is the most densely populated town in the country, if I'm not mistaken. So having anthrax and COVID and other BSL 3 level work here is of great concern. And I would ask that the panel please consider, like Lee said, that not be allowed. Also, to second the other point about the parking, at the last public meeting, they were asked repeatedly if the underground parking garage was going to be for, outsiders and anyone coming into Davis to frequent all our small businesses, which we treasure and which just suffered through the pandemic to even survive. And they indicated that the majority of the spots would be for the tenants of the building. And that was of great concern to all of us who are so caring of our small businesses and how they're going to survive if there's no parking, because they've already eliminated both of the service lots on Grove Street, on the north side of Grove Street, to make room for their building. Thank you so much for your attention to this. Appreciate your time.
Kendra, thanks very much for your testimony. I'm going to ask one more time to see if we can unmute Susan Kinsella, just because her hand is still raised. And if this last time doesn't happen, then I'm going to close testimony unless I see another hand besides hers.
This is Raisa speaking. Suzanne, you are unmuted. You are self-muted on your end. You're going to have to unmute yourself to speak.
Susan, can you hear me? Okay, I'm going to ask Susan to submit written testimony because something is happening technologically that doesn't seem to be remedied this evening. Does anybody else want to provide testimony on this application? I thought I saw one other hand, but I'm going to scroll through one more time before I close testimony once, twice. I'm going to close public oral testimony on this application. The planning board is going to leave written comment open until, what is it, the 12th at noon. So to planning@somervillema.gov. Does anybody have any comments or questions that is important to be asked tonight, or things that cannot wait until we receive written testimony on this application? Okay. Seeing none, is there anything that the applicant wants to address at this time? Or is there stuff that the applicant can address at the next meeting after the collection of all the testimony that we're going to get on this?
This is Rice speaking. I did see Jennifer Schultz. She had her hand raised. I can go and unmute her if that's what the board would like.
If you could unmute counsel, that would be helpful in case she's got something that she needs to address.
Thank you, Raisa, and Chairman and the members of the board. I am counsel for the applicant. I only wanted to address the statement regarding parking not being open and available to the public, and just note for the record that all of our spaces in our garage will be unpaired, as is required in Somerville, so not tied to the leases in the building, and therefore will be open and available, first come, first served, to all members of the public. And that's all I had to say.
Attorney Schultz, thank you very much for clarifying that question that was raised by at least one member of the public. At this time, I think the planning board is going to continue this application until our meeting on the 18th. Chair moves to do so, seconded by Amelia. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Thank you very much to the applicant. We will see you in a few weeks. Again, written testimony will be open through the 12th at noon at planning@somervillema.gov. That concludes all of the public business that we have that are hearings and applications and things like that. The planning board has 2 other items of other business. So for anybody that wants to stick around for other business of the planning board, you are more than welcome. I'm going to do the submission manual requirements, because that is something that we have seen before. I'll invite Emily to, I don't know if you have anything further for us to, to hear as by way of a presentation. But.
I do, Mr. Chair. I have one final presentation to give to you, and with your permission, I will share my screen.
Please do. And thank you very much for the time.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I said thank you very much for the timer earlier.
Oh, my pleasure. So if you can see my screen, I will just start this presentation. So I'm here before you tonight to finish out this submittal requirements manual that was, this complete update was done by the Planning, Preservation, and Zoning Division. It covers the application processes for various zoning request and permit types found in the Somerville zoning ordinance that the Planning, Preservation, and Zoning Division administers, and that the Planning Board and Zoning Board also administer. The manual includes both the requirements that must be met and the recommendations from staff that are intended to be helpful for moving through the process as smoothly as possible. So the board has already reviewed the draft and provided feedback. What is needed now is just to review the final draft and to vote to adopt the new submittal requirements. Once the zoning board and the planning board vote to adopt the new submittal requirements, they will go into effect for any project that has not already completed their application. The zoning board did review the new submittal requirements manual last night, and they voted to approve and adopt it. So the only step left is for the planning board to review and adopt the manual. There have been a few substantive changes since both boards gave feedback. Substantive changes that have been shown in the tracked changes document that you received include additional links to outside resources, and added Arts Council certification in the glossary and in the table, and some additional clarification when necessary in revised language, just to be more precise with regard to certain application processes. There are some more minor changes that were not shown in the tracked changes version of the document you received. Those include Chapter 3 being renamed from Document Dictionary to Glossary, edits to how the links are indicated, and various minor changes, including primarily typos and the addition of page numbers to the table of contents. We are looking at making additional updates in the future. Some of these tasks include incorporating thoroughfares, civic spaces, and master plans into the next version. They're currently treated separately from the manual, but all can be found on the website. The PPZ division will continue to update the manual to keep it relevant and accurate, including addressing additional points of confusion as they arise, and addressing zoning amendments after they're incorporated that might affect submittal requirements. So for example, if the amendment making backyard cottages by right is approved by the City Council, the chapter on backyard cottages would be removed from the submittal requirements manual because it's no longer applicable to this stage of the process. In the future, PPZ staff can make changes and improvements administratively. This is allowed by both the ZBA and the Planning Board's rules and regulations. They delegate authority for creating submittal requirements to planning staff. Staff decided for this update to ask the boards to vote on the submittal requirements, primarily because of the depth and the breadth of the changes being made, and to provide both boards with the formal opportunity to provide feedback, which we've received feedback from both boards and we really appreciate it. Future changes might be minor or significant, but they'll maintain the same framework as approved by the boards in this version of the manual. So future changes might include adding or removing sections as relevant. So the example is removing the section that's related to the backyard cottages if the amendment passes. And if proposals for thoroughfares and civic spaces become more common and staff have additional advice to provide applicants, those sections would also be added. We would also update directions on how to submit application materials as new systems are adopted. And with that, I will conclude the presentation and I can take any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Emily. This was voted on and suggested for adoption by, was it the ZBA, did you say?
That is correct. The ZBA voted to adopt and approve the submittal requirements manual at their meeting last night.
I appreciate that, and I think that is informative for how I look at the document for another board that has a similar task to us. I'd like to hear from my fellow members on their thoughts on submittal manual and where we think we should go with this. Anybody? Yes, Amelia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You, Emily, and Charlotte, I know this has been sort of a huge lift over the last couple of months, so thank you very much for your attention to detail and the updated drafts. And I know we provided a lot of feedback, and I appreciate that it was incorporated. I'm really excited to be able to share this with the applicants in the city. I think this will be a huge help. I have one remaining comment where I think an edit actually made something less clear, and while I would not hold up adoption over it, I would strongly request it as like an administrative change to be considered before publication if possible. which is in the introduction to section 5B. There's been a sentence added that says applicants are also strongly encouraged to follow the guidelines and best practices below in addition to the requirements found in the zoning ordinance. And then this the instruction for scheduling the meeting and requirements for neighborhood meetings. Because we recently had an applicant with this issue where there was ambiguity over sort of what was required in terms of a neighborhood meeting, I would really ask that we clarify what is mandatory and what is best practice, because the introduction lays out that there are those two things included, but then the subsequent sections don't actually identify themselves as such. And I think that that could create process issues later down the road. Sorry to nitpick. Thank you for picking up these changes.
Thank you. I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, I'm certainly happy to see this move for adoption with an administrative and clerical change that you think might need to happen. Does anybody else have any comments or questions on the proposed manual? Seeing none, I think it makes sense to make a motion to adopt manual as proposed with the amended change by Amelia. Thank you very much, Emily, for all the work that you did on this. Seconded by Aaron. Chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And before I finish this topic, I would just like to note I'm seeing it to the end as Charlotte is out of town, but really it was our other staff planners who did the vast majority of the work. I've come in at the tail end and just brought it home, but I would just like to commend the other planners who worked on this and spent a great deal of time on this. They did a wonderful job.
I respect that. It's always important, I think, to acknowledge the team that works on a document like this. The last item on our agenda is a ward councilor amendment, which is something that we previously discussed as a board. I know that I have seen a draft amendment to the ordinance, that it's something that the planning board has suggested that we as a board will propose, if we vote to propose it, for the council to adopt. And I don't know if we have the opportunity to share a screen with the proposed text. I have some suggestions on a revision to the proposed text. I think it's important for us to be able to move forward on a recommendation on this tonight, because we will probably see a lot more applications where a ward councilor is unavailable or unable to represent the neighborhood in the way of a neighborhood meeting. So do we have, Rice or Emily, do we have the opportunity to see the proposed changes? I know I saw a red line earlier today.
This is Rice speaking. If it's easier, Emily, I can share my screen.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Apologies on the delay. I'm just locating the document.
Yeah, sure.
Rice, I found it. If you want, I can share it.
This is Rice speaking. Emily, if you already have it up and you would like to share your screen, feel free.
Yeah, can we blow up the relevant portion, which I thought was paragraph or part 7. Yeah. Could we blow it up just a little bit more because it's, okay, awesome. So the idea behind this was Amelia's actually. So I'm gonna let Amelia, for the benefit of the meeting, if she wants, give a background on why we thought this was an appropriate amendment to suggest to the council.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. The background here is that we have seen over the last couple of years an increasing number of instances where the ward councillor is finds it appropriate to recuse him or herself from the from their role as the neighborhood's advocate in a process due to their own proximity to it, which is of course, you know, something that will happen frequently when ward councillors are responsible for projects in a certain geography in which they live. So the concept here was to create a formalized process for having a different city councillor, possibly one of the at-large councillors, sort of step into that role as the neighborhood's advocate during the review process to ensure that projects where the ward councillor was recused or otherwise unable to perform that function did not sort of miss an opportunity to fully participate in the community process. So I do have questions on the wording that was proposed, but I think generally this captures the spirit of that, and certainly agree with the chair that getting this to City Council for their consideration in a timely fashion would be a priority given the volume of large projects that we have coming up over the next couple of months.
Thanks, Amelia. My job is to do legal drafting. So I have some suggestions for the text, but what I want to do is hear from Jahan and Aaron if you have any thoughts or suggestions on the theory behind the proposed amendment or thoughts on amendments to the text. Yeah, Jahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm wholly in support of this amendment. I think that having council representation as the volume of projects increases is going to be critical, and I would love to see a formalized pathway available for that. So I want to thank the Vice Chair for proposing this, and I would like to convey my full support for this as well. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Aaron.
I'll just echo basically that legal drafting is not my forte. So the sort of spirit of this I think is great, and I'll sort of leave it to the experts on how we can make it happen.
Okay. Yes, Amelia.
Mr. Chair, if I can raise my process question before you get into the weeds of the language, I think that would be the best order here, which is
it's only a sentence. It's gonna take me like a 0.3, if that. Okay.
So I know that we'd emailed about this, Emily, but just for the good of the meeting, where it says the applicant may appeal to the president of the city council, I want to make sure that this is not something that really requires the applicant to proactively seek out an alternative counselor, because I know many applicants may not want to engage as robustly in the community process as we would like them to. So could you just walk us through, I think you explained it by email quite well, sort of how this language actually relates to how the process will work for the applicant and the counselors?
Absolutely. So when they're when they're setting up neighborhood meetings, applicants are already required to reach out to the ward counselor to set up that meeting. So if this allows the applicant, if the ward counselor is unresponsive or if they're unable to participate in any way, that it allows the applicant to request that the president of the city council designate a counselor at large to take the place of the ward counselor who would otherwise be required to be involved. So in effect, it doesn't take away any responsibility from the applicant or a city councilor, but it does facilitate a different city councilor to be the designated point of contact for a project if for some reason a ward councilor is unable to perform his or her responsibilities.
Is there any chance that the word shall instead of may might more clearly communicate the non-optionality of this? I am not here for legal drafting. I will leave it in your all hands.
You're suggesting that instead of saying the applicant may appeal, we say the applicant shall appeal?
Possibly. Just, I welcome thoughts from my colleagues. I guess I want to make sure that the applicant is clear on the intention. And I feel like it does as though it is optional, but perhaps during the course of the process that would become clear.
I for one would support a non-optionality to seeking the alternate counselor. However, wording makes sense to convey that.
Emily, did you want to respond to the suggestion, or because I have some thoughts on the verbiage.
I think that would provide clarification. What this does, I think using the term may provides the applicant some flexibility if there is just like a time between the ward representative being able to respond. But I think using the term shall, I don't think it would create any issues.
I'm going to give some my thoughts on the wording here, and I'll tell you why I'm thinking what I'm thinking. I'd like some clarification by Emily and by writing on the process, right? So if an applicant is making an application and they are otherwise required by the ordinance to have a neighborhood meeting before they come to us, that is part and parcel of the obligation by the applicant, right? They must have a neighborhood meeting before they come to us. And if a ward councilor is unable or unwilling to engage in the facilitation of a neighborhood meeting, which is the obligation not of the council of the applicant to have one, by making it optional, it absolves the applicant of a responsibility if they are otherwise required to have meetings. So the way I would look at this would be this. First of all, I don't know why we're calling a ward representative from the city council. I think that's a little too wordy. They're the ward councilor. I think that's the title. I think that's how it's simplified, right? So because it is an obligation of the applicant to have a neighborhood prior to a hearing at the planning board, and probably the ZBA too, but I can speak to the planning board, and where a ward councilor is unable or unwilling to act in the role to facilitate that required neighborhood meeting, the applicant shall, I don't know about appeal, I don't think there's a formal appeal process, but I would say shall request that the president of the city council designate a councilor at large who will take on the role and responsibilities. Because what that does is the planning board doesn't have the authority under the law and under the ordinances to command the city council to do anything, right? That's not our role. But we do have the authority under our authority in our purview to require an applicant to do it. And an applicant is required to have a neighborhood meeting. And a neighborhood meeting, as it's defined, is something that is facilitated by a ward. So in order for that to be met under the terms, they need to have some sort of a neighborhood meeting, whether it's with the ward council, or if the ward council is not around, then it has to be a council. And we can't require the president of the council to do anything. We can require the applicant to request of them to do that so that they can comply with their application. I think that's what we all want. I think that's how the wording should be made, so that we're in compliance with what the applicant's obligations are, what our authority is under the ordinance, and gets us what we want and what we expect. So I would preface paragraph 7 by saying, because a neighborhood meeting is required for an applicant to make a presentation before the planning board, and because a neighborhood meeting by definition, as defined above, requires the coordination of a ward councilor or a city councilor. Then, if the ward councilor is unwilling or unable to participate in the neighborhood process, the applicant shall request of the president of the city council to designate someone to the ward council instead, or something along those lines. You can keep the role and responsibilities of the ward councilor for the duration. I think that matches what it is that we want to do, while not going outside the bounds of our authority. Yeah, Amelia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those revisions make sense to me. The one thing I would flag, which I don't think is a problem, but I want us to, as a group, discuss the intent, is that as drafted, this does specify a councillor at large as opposed to another ward councillor. I know there are instances where, for instance, Councillor Campen has stepped in for Councillor Scott, and he is technically another ward councillor. So I don't know whether that is, I don't understand well enough the roles and responsibilities of at-large councillors versus ward councillors to know if we should be making that designation. And I suspect that this language was introduced from the way that I had framed it, which makes plenty of sense to me, but I defer to the group on what our intent should be here, whether it can be any other councillor or specifically an at-large councillor that has to be designated.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think we can say, an at-large councillor or a ward councillor at the president's designation. Because you're right. I mean, Ben has stepped into JT a lot. So,
Mr. Chair, if I can speak to simply why councillor at large was used instead of councillor at large or ward councillor. And this is not to say that it has to be this way, but the thinking behind using councillor at large is councillors at large also represent the entire community. So they then presumably also represent the neighborhood, whereas other ward councillors don't necessarily represent the neighborhood that's where the project is located. Again, that's not to say that another ward councillor would not do a fine job representing the neighborhood and could do the job. That was just thinking behind councillors at large.
I think it's fine with at large. I can go either way. I mean, I tend to agree actually with you, Emily, that Alderman at large should have some responsibilities to processes like this. So I have no problem keeping this council at large, and if the council wants to adopt this or modify it in its infinite wisdom, it has the ability to do so. So I'm happy to leave it as councilor at large. I'm also happy to move it forward as I have recommended that it be amended. I don't know if anybody's got any thoughts or further suggestions on this agenda item. Seeing none, what I'd like to do is move that the planning board, is it an introduction, Emily or Riza, or is it a presentation of a proposed amendment to the ordinance?
So this would be the planning board submitting a proposed amendment to the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
And
Thank you. So I move that the planning board present this amendment to the ordinance as amended by the language that was discussed by the board this evening, for their consideration and hopeful adoption. Seconded by Amelia. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Thank you all very, very much.
I'm sorry, was the language supposed to be presented or proposed? I lost track.
it will be proposed to the city council.
I think we said presented. Does that matter process-wise?
I think
I will move to present it for a proposal. Shall we revote?
This is Rice speaking. Either would work.
Either or, then we're good.
Thank you. Thank you guys for working on this diligently. I know this was minutia at the end of a late night, but I think it's important. I appreciate it.
Important. We've got massive buildings coming in areas where council cannot act. So.
Welcome. So, Mr. Chair, we will finish revising the language as was discussed and moved on this evening, and we will share it with you and coordinate regarding next steps to make sure it is then proposed to the city council.
Thank you so much, Emily. Is there any other business that's before the planning board this evening? I think the answer is no, and I think dinner is waiting somewhere for everybody. So seeing nothing further on our agenda, chair moves to adjourn until the 18th, seconded by Amelia. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
And at 8:53 p.m. we are adjourned. Good evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Hi, guys.